Well, I hope you're hungry because I'm going to share with you how I made this very delicious and hearty bowl of corn chowder from my pantry. I just took out, maybe about 10 minutes ago, a batch of my French bread, and one of these is going to go very well with the corn chowder. I'm also going to attempt to not feed 100 billion people today. So I figure if I use a smaller pot, it'll help me sort of portion out what I need. I really only want to feed people for today. I don't want a ton of leftovers, maybe a lunch tomorrow, but I don't want so much that it has to go into the freezer. I have enough of that I'm working through currently. So a smaller pot will definitely help me to scale down my portion sizes. So my list of ingredients, I kind of want to share with you just really fast on what I'm doing and altering a little bit using my pantry and my preserved foods the best that I can. So I did get a bag of potatoes whenever I was at Sam's Club last time. I don't know if I shared it with you. I think I had forgotten to put that on the counter, but in any event, I have just a couple things of potatoes left from a family dinner that we had. But I thought, oh, you don't need to use those. It would take longer for the soup to simmer and cook if, of course, you're using fresh potatoes. So to speed things up, I will be using my canned potatoes instead. I am using frozen corn. You can use fresh. You maybe could use canned, especially if you're using canned potatoes, because it doesn't have to sit and simmer for very long at that point. I think it's always best practice when it comes to things like this to use the fresh or frozen. But if canned is all you have and you've got everything else, just use it, no big deal. Then I wanted to show you my chicken stock. I believe I showed you a recipe, I don't remember which one, where I drained off my canned chicken and I saved the broth, and I told you I'm not wasting that, I will use it for something. I also want to show you that it's been in the fridge, and although it's not super gelatinous, and it's been sitting out already for a couple minutes, so it's not even as gelatinous as it was when I took it from the fridge, but because of canning the chicken with the bone in, the broth that makes, beautiful gelatinous bone broth. And I know a lot of people say if you can bone broth, it kind of breaks, what do they say? It breaks, not breaks the seal, it breaks something. I don't know. What they're trying to say is basically then it's just not as good for you anymore. But you know what? It's been canned. This has been then in the fridge, which is where you find out whether or not your broth is gelatinous. It has to get cold. This is absolutely beautiful chicken broth, and I would never dream of just dumping that down the drain. Oh my goodness, don't do that. And then the rest of the ingredients are just, you know, of course, bacon, different seasonings, and then some half and half or heavy whipping cream. And then it's not part of the recipe, but I will be using dehydrated bell peppers. I do have peppers in the freezer, but they're rather large sized portions. I don't want to open a bag to use a little bit just to throw into the freezer because I've not done my menu plan yet for this coming week. I will do that later today or tomorrow. And so I don't have intentions just yet of knowing how quickly I can go through the opened bag. And if it's opened and in the freezer, it's going to collect, you know, it'll get freezer frost a lot sooner, and I don't want to do that. And I figure I have the dehydrated that I certainly need to work through. So I might as well just use this. Plus I like the little tiny sizes that this is gonna offer me. Working with my frozen diced onions still. I do have fresh onions still left, but you know what? I just kind of want to dump everything in here and just go. So I'm not going to waste my time. Okay, I'm going to turn my burner on and I'm going to get started by throwing a couple tablespoons of butter to the bottom of my pan. I'll put some kind of a recipe down below for you guys. I know the basic ingredients of a corn chowder. I just don't tend to measure all of the time. So since I'm trying to scale it back, I kind of, you know, I'll put the list of ingredients down there for you guys, but I'm not really using a recipe. We're gonna add onion, my frozen diced onions. I've talked about this before. My onions, of course, are kept in the freezer so it retains moisture. So I'm gonna let this simmer so that all of that moisture cooks out first before adding any of my next ingredients. I've got a bag of frozen corn that I have kept, of course, in my freezer. This is from last year's harvest. I did not can all of my corn. I do purposefully set aside some frozen because you just use it in different methods, of course. Different recipes, you don't want to use canned corn. So I'm going to take some of this and go ahead and add it now, since it does need to cook down a little bit longer than any of my other ingredients. Again, I'm trying to sort of pay attention to my portions to not make me have to move this to a bigger pot. It is corn chowder after all though, so your main ingredient should be heavy on the corn. Okay, I'm gonna say we're gonna call that good. Probably about 2.5 cups, I would say. Heavy 2.5 to 3 at most. Now is a good time to add your seasonings. I really like adding any seasonings, herbs, whatever, in the very beginning as much as possible, because it really helps, in my opinion, to kind of integrate those flavors, and the longer they can cook together, the more flavorful your dish will be. So I'm going to add salt and pepper. I have freeze-dried garlic. I don't have any fresh, so of course I'll just use freeze-dried. I did make a dish not long ago. I believe I shared it with you. I can't remember. Where I hydrated it first. But since this is a soup / chowder, it's going to have plenty of time to simmer and to hydrate, so I don't need to worry about doing that for this particular recipe. We're going to add some smoked paprika. And some thyme. I like to sort of smush my dried herbs to really, one, just to get them a little bit smaller, break them up, but it will definitely release those oils, allowing it to be more fragrant and, of course, then to taste better. We can adjust any seasonings later on if we think, you know, we need a little bit more of something. So always go on the shy end at first. You can always add, and as we know, you can't take away. So, okay, let that simmer here for just a couple of minutes. I'm using the bagged bacon crumbles. Cooking your own bacon is definitely ideal, which I did do this morning, but we ended up not having as much left over as I thought I would, so I will just resort to this. I'm not a fan of this straight from the bag, so I'm going to add it here into You could use ham as well, which I did contemplate using, but I decided bacon would be good. So I'm using a couple tablespoons of that. I'm gonna get it cooked down here just for a minute or so before adding the rest of the ingredients. And while that's in there, this is where I'm going to add my flour. I used 3 tablespoons of butter, so I'm roughly going to use about 3 tablespoons of flour. This will help to get a thicker chowder, of course. So we will be adding heavy cream later, which will absolutely help to thicken it up too. And you want that to cook for about a minute or so, because you want to cook off any of the raw flour taste that comes with adding flour straight to the dish. Okay. This is where you're going to add chicken broth. Beautiful gelatinous chicken broth. My goodness, it's beautiful. I'm actually going to do the rest in water. I opted not to open a brand new jar of chicken broth from my pantry. I've got 1 quart of water going in. Let's get our potatoes in. I will go in fact, I could have did it before, but that's okay. It'll break up a lot easier once this simmers for a little bit, but I will go in and sort of break up those large potato pieces. This is where I'm going to add just a little bit of green pepper. Again, not usually part of the recipe that I've made, but why not? If I have it, just a couple spoonfuls, it'll add some great flavor. And since I used some water, I'm actually going to use some dehydrated chicken broth. This has amazing flavor. I ordered this from Azure Standard. I use it every single time I make my, we'll just do two spoonfuls for now. Every time I make my chicken noodle soup, and everyone wants to know, like, what do I add? Because they always say how good it is. The secret is just some dehydrated chicken broth. Really levels up that flavor for you. Okay, and as I kind of scan through my ingredients here, this is about it. I'm going to allow this to simmer really low. I want to be careful not to scorch anything on the bottom. I want to be careful that the flour that's in here is going to thicken, and so I don't really want it at a super high temperature by any means. I'm just going to let this slowly simmer for a good 10 minutes to 15 before we come and add our heavy cream. We'll taste it to see if we need to adjust anything. This is a really quick, easy, fast recipe, especially when you're using canned ingredients like the potatoes. I absolutely love replacing canned with fresh where and when it makes sense. And this is definitely something that makes sense to do that. Why wait 20 minutes longer if you don't have to? Okay, I'm gonna put a lid on this if I can find it. Checking on it every so many minutes, of course, stirring, but letting it kind of work through thickening and simmering the vegetables for 10 to 15 minutes. This is where you can take an immersion blender to blend it up You could also just portion out some of this, put it into a blender, put it back in here. That will also help to thicken everything. I don't know, I just couldn't be bothered with doing that today. That just sounds like more dishes to me. So I took a potato masher and just went in and mashed it. And so between the flour and the starch from the potatoes, of course, that helped to thicken the chowder quite a bit. I'm going to give this a little taste to see how we're looking with our flavors here. Oh, that's really good. I don't know that I need to change anything. I'm gonna go ahead and put some heavy cream in here, maybe about a 1/4 cup or so. Definitely want that at a lower temperature as well. You don't want to add heavy cream to things that are boiling. That will not turn out good for you. I'm gonna go ahead and taste again, but I'm gonna get where I have some of that green pepper. I want to make sure it's hydrated, because if that needs a while, then of course I need to simmer it according to the peppers and not flavor or anything else. So, okay, those are perfect. So let's talk about potatoes again. Dehydrated potato shreds is another option you could use for this chowder. You could use frozen hash brown, diced, shredded, whatever. When you are thinking about creating a meal, I think for a lot of us, we tend to fall into the category of, oh yes, we're having a craving for corn chowder. I need to go to the store, I need to buy potato, corn, da-da-da-da-da. I think where some of us can find ourselves into the category of not enjoying cooking, not feeling like we have time for it, I think it's because we've been conditioned along the way, and who knows how or why, to kind of start from scratch almost. So again, I even fell to, oh, let me go to the cabinet and grab out my potatoes. And I was like, wait a minute, stop it. I have the time today. I don't necessarily need it to be quick, but let me save my fresh baking potatoes for when we want a baked potato, right? And let me go to another method that I have on hand. So I would like to challenge you, while you're going through your menu planning, see if you're somebody who struggles with trying to get dinner or lunch on the table every day. I would challenge you to see what you can do to cut corners. They sell canned potatoes at the grocery store. Again, you can use dehydrated or you could use frozen. It doesn't always have to be the freshest ingredients to make something really delicious, especially when it comes to a potato. A potato is a potato. Just find which method you have and throw it in the pot. All right, I'm gonna let this sit. Take it off the burner. That's done. We're gonna slice up some of this bread, and then I'll show you how I like to dish up my bowl of chowder. I do have a video on my channel all about making my French bread. It is so delightful. It's got a nice little outside crust, but it's super soft as well. It is my family's absolute favorite. Absolute favorite. We had a family dinner not long ago. I made 4 loaves. I make 4 loaves every single time I make a batch. 2 of them were eaten for dinner that day. And then the next day, I only needed 1 of them for dinner, but they were both eaten because my stepson, he's an adult, was here with some of his friends to go fishing in our pond and all of that. And his absolute favorite is my bread. And so when he comes home, he'll go into the pantry and ask if I have any fresh bread. And of course, I had already still had 2 of those loaves left over, so him and his friends enjoyed an entire loaf to themselves, which is absolutely fine. So if you're interested in that recipe, I will link it for you. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, so good. So with my bowl, I like to top it with a little bit of cheese. You probably could add cheese to the entire dish if you'd like. With my corn chowder, I don't do that. I don't know why. Not everybody, I guess, enjoys it. I've got a little bit shredded here, and then I will do some fresh when everybody comes back to eat. I'll just use up what's here. It's not quite dinner time yet, and everyone is eating at a different schedule today, and I did not have lunch, so it's 5 o'clock. It's practically dinner time. We usually eat at 6:30, but I made it early today. I'm gonna put some chives over the top. Of course, I only have the freeze-dried. I don't have any fresh right now. And then I will add some of that butter to a fresh slice of bread here. And that is going to be my dinner today. So I hope you give this recipe a try. I'm telling you, it's phenomenal. It is absolutely fantastic with ham. If you're someone who doesn't like bacon, of course, or you don't even have to put a meat in there. By all means, leave it out if you want. So this comes the time where I get to say goodbye. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, and absolutely feel free to share with me down below your corn chowder recipe or variation of what you do different from me, because I'd love to give it a try. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again real soon here in my kitchen.